So if the question is how long has the federal government been looking at this file? For a long time. And we've got lots of policy on it. The problem isn't policy. We're policy rich and operations poor. That's the problem. We've had in 2016, we had the Pan-Canadian Framework on Clean Growth and Climate Change, which had explicit direction in it in Chapter 4 on how to mobilize adaptation. Nothing happened. From that report. 2018, we had the Adaptation Resiliency Measures Roundtable and Report. That came out in 2018. Within 6 months, that sat on a shelf. Now, in 2023, we had the National Adaptation Strategy, which put out 26 targets to mobilize action on adaptation, 10 of which are to be realized before 2026 closes. And we're virtually going to miss all of those. So the problem is when we have known solutions to known problems and we cannot get the federal government to act, to mobilize on that direction. That's the problem. I mean, we know the actions to be taken to take a house and or a community and make it less exposed to wildfire. We know exactly what needs to be done to take houses and communities to make them less vulnerable to flooding. We can use berms, diversion channels, holding ponds, cisterns, bioswales, permeable surfacing to direct water to safe locations and keep people and property out of harm's way. What we need to do is mobilize known solutions to known problems, and we need to do it rapidly. And just to be clear, you know, people need to understand that climate change is irreversible, period. Climate change is here to stay. We're not going backwards. All we can do is slow it down. So if we think extreme weather is extreme now, just hold on, because it's going to get a lot worse going forward. Basically, Canada has to swallow some very tough medicine on flood risk mapping. It's the kind of, people like flood risk maps until they have them. And then all of a sudden they find out this community over here or this community over here is now designated as being in a flood zone. And people, I can tell you, I've been involved in this many times, people go apoplectic when that happens because you've now devalued their property and stigmatized it, you've red tagged it. And almost immediately they start with, how do we even know climate change is real? Like that's, you know, that will be their response. However, by not recognizing that we need floodplain maps to direct where not to build or where to reinforce building to mitigate the flood risk. By not addressing this is what, for the graph I showed at the very beginning with the costs going up, you know, exponentially. That's what you get. There is no way to cheat this system. If you cheat the system, you're going to lose. And that's the way it is.
Okay. Mr. Feltmate, you brought up the ratio between measures to mitigate extreme weather events, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, and to adapt. And I think the ratio you shared was 26 to 1, mitigation versus adaptation. I think it would be interesting to know what, from a public policy standpoint, what would be a good ratio, or at least a good range for that to be. And has there been any study by the insurance industry or the adaptation community on what that ratio should be?
Yeah, in terms of a study, I'm not sure it was a study, but when you turn to the Insurance Bureau of Canada, for example, was leaning more into the zone of 50-50. And I'm not sure that was based on a rigorous algorithm than more gut feel. But you know, what they were saying, it certainly is not, you know, it's certainly not 24 to 1. And but it's, you know, I think probably very much in that zone of a 50-50 ratio that many people would agree with.
Okay, thank you. I believe it was you, Mr. Feltmate, that presented the graph showing the increased rate of insured losses over the years. My first question was, were those inflation-adjusted numbers? Okay, I thought so.
Well, it's adjusted for inflation and for per capita wealth accumulation. In other words, if you were insuring twice as many homes today as 10 years ago, you'd assume insurance would be twice as high. So that's taken into account. So horizontally, you were looking at a comparison of apples to apples. Okay.
Good. And it was a curve, and it was a curve that was getting steeper. It's hard to imagine a more existential crisis for an insurance industry than unmitigated climate change. How prepared is the insurance industry for that curve to get steeper?
Well, so I'm not speaking for the insurance industry, but overall, there's about 160 property and casualty insurance companies in Canada, or something in that order. I could say some are very well prepared. It tends to be those at the larger end of the equation are much better prepared than others, but there's a lot of variance in the system.
Okay. And how well are the different levels of government, you mentioned municipal government and the insurance industry is working quite well together. Provinces and the federal government, you were leaving those out, I noted. So how big is the gap? How much more, what would you like to see?
From my perspective, I spend a great deal of time with mayors and councillors across this country. And I would say something like 9 out of 10 mayors, when you show them this is what you need to do, the actions you need to take in your community to help your constituents not end up with a flooded basement or their house burned down, 9 out of 10 get it instantly within 5 or 10 minutes, and they want to mobilize action to mitigate the risk. Adaptation in Canada is moving forward at the level of the municipality. One quick point, and so we're talking a lot about insurance and incentives and adjustments in premiums and cap limits and so forth. That's all important, but also don't forget the banks. So we're in the early stages of discussion right now with the banks for homeowners who put the measures in place to mitigate flood or wildfire risk. Could they get a couple of basis points shaved off the cost of their mortgage because there's a lower probability of them having a flooded basement or a house burned down, which if you're holding the mortgage on a property, that's important. So there's multiple financial drivers emerging rapidly.